Good evening. Tonight, two stories in desperate need of a second look. The Keystone Pipeline is one. Lots of noise about it in the presidential campaign. We will quietly contribute some facts about jobs and the environment. Then Twitter's new censorship policy. Should we worry that a force for good has gone evil? But before we begin those investigations, let's meet a serious man with a humorous bent who has been thinking and writing about race. Writer Baratunde Thurston, who directs things digital at The Onion, the satirical newspaper, has written a new guidebook called How to Be Black. It is full of useful insights, no matter what your color. Yeah. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's good to be here.
I was going to hold up the book so the people could see it, but I see there's no need.
Wear the book cover. Then
Talk
you always
about
have it.
Shameless self-promotion.
No shame in this game, not at all.
But I have to ask you, how do white people react when you're walking down the street? How do black people react when you're walking down the street wearing a sweatshirt, How to Be Black?
So this was actually my first day wearing it. In fact, coming to your studio was the first time I had it outside of the office at The Onion, and I was running the entire time, so everybody just got out of my way. I'm not sure if it's because of the shirt, it's because of me, it's because of the speed with which I was tearing through New York City. So it's not a representative sample yet. I'll have to get back to you on the real reaction.
Okay. Yeah. So for people who don't know you, you have a satirical side, you have a serious side. You're co-founder of the serious political website, Jack and Jill Politics. Black-oriented site, but also with The Onion, and you're a comedian. So how do you see this book walking that line?
I think this book does a dance, and it certainly sits in the humor section of the bookstore and of the online retailers. I've been doing stand-up for a decade, and the goal was really to use storytelling and humor to get at some often uncomfortable topics like, what does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be you? And how are you existing in relation to the way that people often expect you to be? And there's a huge gap between that for most people, not just black people.
And you say in the introduction that this book is about the meaning of blackness and the changing nature of that.
Yeah.
So how is that a serious thought, and how is that a setup to a punchline?
Well, everything's a setup to a punchline if you deal with it the right way. The seriousness is, we've had blackness often defined, both within the black community and especially without, by people who don't necessarily have the interests of black people at heart. You've got, oversimplified media that says, okay, to be black means to be thuggish, or to be the sassy black woman, or to be these archetypes that reduce the full range of humanity down to a few simple types. The humorous side of it says you can have a lot of fun with what the how-to part of it means, and just what roles are expected or not of black people. So I have a chapter, How to Be the Next Black President, for example. We've learned a lot from President Obama's years in office, from his campaign, from how people react positively and negatively. So you shouldn't probably, for example, talk about black people if you're the black president, because it really makes certain folks on the conservative side extra itchy, so it gets them on that Kenyan Muslim, you're not American thing again. Preferably don't even make eye contact with black people if you're going to be a successful black president.
And if I remember correctly, the chapter after How to Be the Next Black President is, how's that post-racial thing working out for you?
That's right, a very formal title for a very formal subject, deserving of all the philosophical interests that it has raised. Post-racial America, not something that really exists according to the people I interviewed for the book, and according to me as well.
You have a chapter called How to Speak for All Black People.
Yeah.
And you note that the media is a good place to practice that art. First, on this idea, for people who may seem to think, well, what does that mean, how to speak for all black people?
So what it means is, if you are a black person and you're around people who aren't, whether at work or at play or through your social life, through school, if you ever make a comment about race, ever, you're now the spokesperson for your race to all other people. That's kind of how it works. And I think women have experienced this too, whether you're at the workplace, et cetera. People are gonna assume certain behaviors of you represent everybody.
Why do black people, like you can speak for everybody?
Well, it's not that we can, it's that we're sort of forced to by circumstance.
Exactly.
And we're, for so many non-us, we are the closest representative that people have access to. Because what else do they have? They've got radio, they've got mass media, and they've got you. They've got Derek. Let's say, for example, your name was Derek. There's not a shadowy figure over your shoulder named Derek. So they're going to say, hey, Derek, so what do you think about Obama and his relationship to the inner city? What do you think about MIA's performance at the Super Bowl yesterday? What do you think about anything that's related to black or brown people? You kind of
So you're the focus group of one.
Yeah, so you have an opportunity there.
And how about in the media?
In the media, there's an obsession with sort of, I think it's born of the leftovers of the civil rights movement. There's got to be a spokesperson. There's got to be a leader. Who's the black leader to tell us what black people want and how they're doing and how they're faring and what are they eating now? What are they listening to? Who's the Jesse or the Farrakhan or the King or the X? And so they have, for years now, kind of pre-designated certain types of leaders in the community as leaders of the entire community. They're getting better, quite honestly. I think with blogging, they're finding new voices. I am often among those voices, and so that chapter, kind of poking fun at myself too.
And you mentioned you might be the liberal black spokesman in the media, or you might take an alternative career path and become the conservative black spokesperson for everybody.
Yeah, here's the deal. I mean, if you're looking to be a spokesperson for black people, you got to look at supply and demand. This is really an economic situation, and the supply of left-leaning progressive black spokespeople is significantly higher than that of the conservatives. So if you want to make money, if you're looking for an economic opportunity, if you want to boost your business, you got to wear the conservative banner. You got to talk down to black people. You got to blame pathology for their own problems. And it's really, there's just fewer of you, so the price goes up. It's basic supply and demand.
One of your chapters is how to be the black employee. Is that different from being the white or the Latino or the Asian employee?
Some days it's the same. Some days you are just dealing with the same bad healthcare system and the same inept middle management or that you're dealing with as an employee. But other days you're treated a little more special. If you're the black employee, people want you to hang out. They want to see that you're happy, that you're fitting in, that you're having a good time socially, that you go to the company holiday party. And again, those questions of spokeswoman and spokesmanship also occur in the workplace, often where you're trapped in places like the elevator where you can't get out to avoid the question.
And the question is there. And so is one of your roles as the black employee to make your white colleagues feel comfortable with you?
It's really your unannounced second job. You were hired for a particular job that's on the resume, that's posted on your cubicle, or if you have an office, good for you. But you also have this other job, which is your presence makes the company feel more diverse, makes it feel less racist, makes people feel progressive and good about themselves, and gives them a resource to throw some of these questions that maybe they can't ask in their neighborhood because we still live in pretty segregated ways.
Right. So if I asked you, like, what did you think of Herman Cain?
I would do what I'm doing right now. Close my eyes, laugh, and then cry a little bit inside.
But he, was he seen, you think he was seen as black by white America in the same way that Barack Obama is?
Not the same way. Definitely not the same way. And Obama's blackness has been so investigated by the media. He's been cast as not black in so many ways because he's not the descendant of slaves, because he was raised in Hawaii, which isn't really America, even though it really is America, because his mom was white and he's actually biracial. So there are attempts there to say, oh, he's not really black. And then when it comes to the fears, it's like he's super black. He wants to hook black people up with reparations and welfare checks and all kinds of boosted government benefits programs that are not anywhere near his plan, but it's sort of the secret fears and not so secret fears of a lot of people. Herman Cain represented, I think, a man who for the longest time assured a certain type of white voter, not all by any means, but especially within his party, he never spoke about race. And that was the comfort that he brought. Here's a clearly black guy who's not going to harp about race anymore. Good for him, good for us, good for America.
And he owned an Italian food chain.
Yes, he did.
A pizza restaurant chain.
Yeah.
So he couldn't be too black.
Nah, well, I don't know. Mediterranean people are very, very brown skins.
There you go. You also have a chapter in the book called How to Be the Black Person at Harvard.
Well, being black at Harvard, yeah, that was more of the memoir. I mean, the book ultimately is a personal story, and all these how-tos punctuate the life that I've lived, which is a pretty ridiculous, in a good way mostly, life. So the Harvard chapter was being black at Harvard, and it was not a guide, though I guess you could probably infer a few things from my experience.
And you start that chapter with the experience of your first day there,
Yeah.
and nobody saying hello.
Yeah, see, here's the deal. I mean, I grew up in Washington, D.C., which is right on the Mason-Dixon line. Has a bit of Southern charm. People hold the doors for you. They say hello. They make eye contact walking down the street. New York, I've been here almost 5 years, and I was told it's the most horrible, rude place with people who couldn't be bothered. And I lived in Boston for 12 years. New York's got nothing on the rudeness of people in Boston. That is a cold town, both temperature-wise and sort of emotionally. They got a real chip on their shoulder, and I think New Yorkers are indifferent to your plight in a way that maybe something bad's happening to you on the street, they'd rather catch their train, but they're not gonna actively like plot against you in the way a Bostonian would look down.
So if one city, let's say, loses the Super Bowl, they're going to take it much worse than the other one?
For years, I have rooted for Boston teams merely because I thought they could use the happiness in their lives, and the riots just, were getting out of hand up there.
You have a big following on social media.
Yeah.
Do you have a preferred one, like Facebook versus Twitter, Tumblr, Foursquare, whatever?
I think they vary by use, but overall, Twitter is my favorite because it's the cheapest. I can send a text message in, I can log in from a web browser, I can add a quick hashtag, I can get little mobile alerts. So it takes it's the most rapid and sort of stream of consciousness. As I watch the Super Bowl, for example, I didn't catch most of yesterday's because I was traveling, but I love doing this live commentary. I, for example, watch all the Twilight movies, and I live hate tweet them so that others don't have to suffer.
Right from the theater?
From the theater.
I hope you have quiet thumbs.
I sit in the back row, and so my screen doesn't glow in anyone's face, and I go to an early show, probably 10:30, 11 a.m., before there's a big crowd. If I can prevent one person from seeing this horrible, horrible storyline, I've done my job as an American.
It's amazing that after writing so many 140-character essays,
Yeah.
you can write a full-length book.
It's good that you brought that up. It's hard. I underestimated how hard it is to write a book. I've been writing columns for a big part of my life, blogging, got thousands of blog posts under my belt, and I thought, oh, this is just a really long blog post. It is not a really long blog post, and I had to sort of sequester myself away from distractions and away, in many ways, from social media to just stay focused on getting the story out, which required much more concentration than I'm used to in this sort of fast-paced, tweetable world.
And how about Foursquare, the location network? If I remember correctly, I've seen you as the mayor of a restaurant or two, meaning
Yeah.
you go there more than anybody else and then log on from there?
That's right. I'm the Foursquare Mayor of the Year for the previous year, 2010. I don't know if they've declared a new mayor yet, so I'm still hold the title. And I love Foursquare. I like often check in when I go to places publicly. I checked in when I came here to let people know that I'm here on your show.
Newt Gingrich calls Romney Obama light.
Yes, he does. Newt Gingrich.
You don't think that's a color reference, do you?
I don't think it is. I think Newt Gingrich is probably talking about policy and really sticking to the political agenda, and not, in this case, making wildly weird racial statements.
But do you think race will be a problem for Obama in 2012 in a different way than it was, or more than it was in 2008?
I don't know if race will be a problem for Obama. Race may be a problem for the conversation the country has about President Obama, but it's not his problem, right? It is sort of our collective problem and how we choose to deal with it. I hope that we have gotten through a lot of the ugliness of challenging his Americanness, of sort of assuming the worst, of painting him with this broad brush. I doubt that that's the case, because you hear the rhetoric of someone like Newt Gingrich, who calls him the food stamp president, and uses all these signals and these terms, really returning to the 90s, which I thought we had kind of gotten beyond, but apparently it's throwback time in our politics, and we're bringing back the language and the people and the outdated way of thinking of issues that we did back then.
As you said, your book is part memoir,
Yeah.
part straight satire. On the serious side, you dedicate it to your mother.
Absolutely. That was very serious. That was no joke. My mom was the major influence in my life. She was kind of a hero and a saint in some ways, though not without her own flaws like all people have. But she helped set me up for what became a pretty amazing life. She navigated me through tough times on the streets of DC. She found educational resources for me by, really pooling funds and leaning on neighbors and making it work.
And you grew up in sort of inner city DC, but then you went to the elite school Sidwell Friends,
Yeah.
where you were one of very few minority folks.
That's right. I mean, I have one of those stories. One of those success stories. Inner city kid makes good, goes to Harvard. I don't know why he talks like that when there's a black preacher talking about him, but So
So
that's
at
part of my
Sidwell,
story.
at Harvard,
yeah.
you have a lot of experience kind of speaking for all black people.
Yeah, and also navigating through different layers of blackness. I mean, so being in urban DC at that time opened me to a certain type of black experience, which is somewhat portrayed on a lot of mass media. Then my mom was a very political person, and so she had a lot of Afrocentric black power politics running constantly through our household. That is not a story that America hears too much of. We heard a small piece of it around Reverend Wright, just a small distorted piece, speaking back to President Obama. Then I had the sort of Sidwell Friends, where I went to private high school, and then Harvard University experience, which is, again, totally different. So,
and so
the
you
shades of blackness are many.
Are many, and you're really a chameleon because of all of that stuff, plus you go to the serious side of politics on Jack and Jill, and the humorous on The Onion, and I think we've barely communicated how hysterical this book is. So a lot of lines to walk being Baratunde Thurston.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, look, humor is the key to opening the door to a lot of touchy stuff. Who would you rather hear talk about some difficult issue, a preacher, a politician, or a comedian? And in many cases, the comedian is the best introduction to the topic, if not the last word.
But I can't read this book and learn how to be black, right?
You can learn what it means to be black. You can't learn to be black yourself. You can, however, get a little bit blacker. We can all do that, even black people.
Maybe something for a sequel.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Up next, Planet White House. Everything you wanted to know about the Keystone Oil Pipeline, but didn't know who to ask.
Ma, guess what? I went back to college. No, I didn't quit my job. I'm finishing my degree with a CUNY Online Bachelor's in Business. I interact online with real City University of New York faculty on a schedule that fits my busy life. Ma, you should look who's teaching at CUNY. And it all leads to a high-quality Bachelor of Science degree in business. I can attend class anywhere, anytime. Yes, Mom, even at your house Friday night for dinner.
The CUNY Online Baccalaureate. Get back to business.
Welcome to the Solar Generation Road Trip. If you want to know how solar energy is working for America, you have to go out and ask America. We're talking to people from coast to coast who are using solar power every day. From a few panels on a homeowner's roof to large solar plants with enough utility power for a whole town. Solar energy is working for America now, saving us money, creating new jobs, and giving our world a brighter future. Welcome to the Solar Generation.
Into each life, a little rain must fall. And what rains on our cities flows into what we drink. The Arbor Day Foundation invites you to plant trees in your community, so the water that flows into our rivers and streams will be clean and safe. Visit arborday.org to find out how to plant the right trees in the right place. And support Tree City USA, where you live. Go to arborday.org.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
Time for another edition of Planet White House, where we take a long look at environmental issues that the presidential campaign usually reduces to sound bites. This week, the Keystone Pipeline that would carry oil from Canada to Texas. President Obama chose to study it more rather than approve it on a deadline that Republicans pushed for recently. Environmentalists were happy, but the president has been attacked for choking off oil and jobs. In his oddly joyous concession speech after losing the Florida primary, Newt Gingrich said he would fix the Keystone problem right after his inauguration.
We're going to sign on that day the authorization for the immediate deployment of the Keystone Pipeline as of that day. My message to the people of Canada is, don't cut a deal with the Chinese. Help is on the way. By January, you're going to build the right pipeline to the right place.
Newt Gingrich after losing in Florida. So What are those people so happy about? And what are the facts about the Keystone Pipeline? How many jobs would it create? Why are the unions at war over this? What's the environmental risk? Isn't the U.S. already laced with pipelines? And what about Canada, where these oil sands are dug from the wilderness? Many questions. And let's begin with jobs. Lara Skinner does research for the Global Labor Institute here in Manhattan. Darren Good is a staff writer at Politico who has written about the union split and joined us via Skype from Washington. Hello to both of you.
Hey, Brian.
And Lara, the estimate that tens of thousands of jobs would be created. Just fact check this for us. Is there a real number?
Yeah, so the Cornell Global Labor Institute did a more comprehensive jobs analysis of the pipeline in September. And basically what we found is the number of jobs that TransCanada and other proponents of the pipeline say are going to be created are vastly inflated. They say that 20,000 direct construction jobs are going to be created by the pipeline. We found 2,500 to 4,650 jobs.
You can build a pipeline all the way from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico with that few people?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, they need very few people, per segment of the pipeline that's being built. A lot of it, requires heavy equipment operation, which is not labor intensive. It's more capital intensive. The other part is they say that it's going to create 7,000 manufacturing jobs. We looked into this more. The main material input for the pipeline is steel, and we found that 50% of the steel has already been manufactured outside of the U.S. So their claim that this is 7,000 U.S. manufacturing jobs, it's unsubstantiated.
Now, those are all short-term jobs for the construction of the pipeline. What about permanent, long-term jobs, maintaining it and working in the oil industry?
The bulk of the jobs are actually in constructing the pipeline. So our estimate found that the permanent jobs that would be created for operating and maintaining the pipeline for the whole six pipeline region is less than 130 jobs.
And some of those several thousand jobs aren't in the United States, they're in Canada, right?
Right, well, a portion of the pipeline is in Canada.
So Dean Good from Politico, why is labor so split on this? Give us a little primer on which unions are supporting the president, Darren, I'm sorry, which unions are supporting the president on his decision to delay the pipeline? Which unions are critical of him?
Well, construction worker unions have long been pushing for the pipeline. So Labor's International Union, the Teamsters, the Building and Construction Trades of the AFL-CIO, they've been pushing for this thing for a while. And for a long time there's relatively small unions representing transport workers, a transit union that were opposed to that. That all changed about 3 weeks ago when some big unions like the Surface Employees International Union being one of them, which is a massive donor to the Democratic Party, they came out with a joint statement with environmental groups praising the president for pushing this, praising the president for rejecting the pipeline now. And that really, I think, significantly changed the power struggle within the labor community because, again, before Republicans were able to say, look, these major unions are pushing for this pipeline. Only these kind of smaller unions are against it, and that really changed.
So he's got a lot of union push against the pipeline. But what about the coalition of progressives, which we usually think of as being anchored in both the labor and environmental communities? Is that coalition fraying over this?
Well, it's definitely within the labor camp, it's definitely frayed. I mean, the response that I was getting, I spoke directly with some people in the labor movement that have been pushing for this pipeline, and they said, essentially, why are these unions like SEIU, who didn't have a dog in this fight, why are they all of a sudden going on the record on this? And they were really upset. And this is probably going to come to a head when AFL-CIO has a meeting, an executive meeting in March. They basically said that the gloves are now off, the rules have changed. They're now thinking about possibly getting involved in issues that they normally wouldn't have, that these other unions, be it SEIU, be it the auto workers and others, issues that they care about. And essentially, again, their message was like, back off on this. This is our issue. It's not yours. So definitely within the labor camp, they're afraid feelings here. Also, the Laborers International Union, their first response to that joint statement was they left what's called the Blue-Green Alliance, which is a coalition of environmental groups and labor unions that, generally speaking, have the same thoughts as far as sustainable energy projects and other types of agendas.
Darren, thanks for filling us in on that. And Lara, this is exactly where your expertise lies, this intersection between labor union politics and environmental group politics. And this is not a new source of tension, is it?
No, I mean, this is a difficult issue. I mean, we have high unemployment in the country right now. This is, what they call a shovel-ready project. And the construction unions are saying, look, we don't care how few jobs it is, we're going to get jobs from this pipeline. I think the real issue, though, is that we need a real jobs plan that's going to create a substantial number of jobs in the U.S., and we don't have that. And we don't have comprehensive climate legislation in the U.S. that can really drive investment in the clean energy sector, where actually, job growth is much greater than it is in the overall economy.
So tell us how this fits into a historical context of tension between labor unions and environmentalists. Again, the blue-green coalition. Where is it together? Where do they bump heads?
Well, I mean, I would say in response to one of the things that Darren said was, that the laborers have been upset, that they say, the other unions don't have a dog in this race. But I'd like to point out that, on other issues like healthcare, all of the unions weigh in, right? Even if they don't have union members who are in the healthcare sector. They see it as a larger issue that affects their members. It's important to their overall well-being. And so they weigh in on it.
So why would SEIU, which represents service workers, come out against this? Why would they think that whatever environmental risk there is from the pipeline would negatively affect their members' jobs?
I think there's a couple reasons. I mean, I think that a lot of union members are speaking up to their leadership and saying, we care about climate change, and our families and our communities are being impacted by it, and we want to make change and make sure that climate protection legislation is implemented in the U.S. And I also think that they saw Obama getting beat up, and that this was really being framed as a jobs versus environment issue. When it really isn't that. This is not a substantial job creation project. And so they felt they needed to step in and say, look, we really need to have job creation projects that are sustainable for communities too. And the same Republicans who have been saying, we need to approve this pipeline have not been trying to push through legislation that would actually create jobs.
Now, Laura, stay with us, and let's add another voice to the conversation. Tom Meisner, co-author of Oil and Gas Pipelines in Non-Technical Language. That's his book. He's managed pipelines for big firms like Conoco, now teaches about them at his own firm. Tom joins us via Skype from the Houston area. Thank you for coming on with us, and hello from New York.
Hello, Brian. My pleasure to be here.
Tell us about pipelines like this. Are they labor intensive, short and long term, and how do you see the environmental risk?
Well, there's definitely a lot more people that are required when the pipeline is being built than when it's being operated. So you have people that are welding the pipelines, spreading the pipes out. Once the pipeline is built, it's fairly capital intensive and not very labor intensive.
Are they already everywhere? The country is already laced with pipelines, probably much more than most Americans realize, correct?
There are quite a number of pipelines across the U.S., around 300,000 miles of natural gas pipelines, a little bit over 160,000 miles of oil pipelines made of crude oil, refined products, and then highly volatile liquids like propane and butane and ethane.
We have on our screen, I don't know if you can see it, a map of oil pipelines existing or proposed around the United States. This is your map, isn't it?
It's a map that was extracted from one of my training classes. I wasn't the one that originally put together the map, and no, I'm afraid I can't see it on the screen.
So, viewers, the black line that starts up in Western Canada and proceeds diagonally down to the right, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, to the right of Texas, that black line is the proposed Keystone oil pipeline. But Tom, I see that some of it is solid black and some of it is dotted black. How come?
That's right. The dotted black are actually the phases that are proposed, and the solid line is a line that's already been built and it's in existence and in operation right now. So it runs down into Cushing, Oklahoma.
What's all the blue?
The blue are other pipelines that are running across the U.S. major lines that have been there, either new lines or lines that have been there for some period of time.
How about the red?
The red, I don't remember what the key is on that. I don't have the map here in front of me.
All right, and the yellow, I believe, is other proposed oil pipelines. So I guess if Keystone goes through, we're going to be seeing other Canada all the way south through the United States kinds of lines. With your experience in the business, do you think Americans are too worried about the environmental impact of pipelines?
You know, Brian, I've just pulled the picture or the drawing up, and so let me just add, the red lines are basically import lines coming in from Canada with Canadian crude. The yellow lines, there you can see that they're bracketed, and two of the lines say proposed, and they're pointing to those bracketed areas which bracket the dotted black line and the other dotted black line that's closer to the Gulf Coast.
So that pipeline from Canada, red, we see it over around Vancouver and Trans Mountain, goes all the way to New York State. That's a heck of a pipeline system.
There are lines that have come down from Canada for a number of years with the production up there, first of conventional crude oil and now the tar sands. So yeah, it's been operating for many years, and most of that is the Enbridge system.
And of course, at a certain point, we heard about the Exxon Valdez oil spill. That was a tanker sitting offshore. I don't remember ever hearing about a big Alaska oil pipeline spill. So again, do you think that Americans are too worried about the pipeline, or what would you say to assess the risk from your point of view?
Anytime you have something built by people, there's a risk of a failure. So there have been pipeline failures. I think when you look at it, we need to have pipelines in order to move crude oil, refined products, natural gas that all of us want, so we can travel and we can stay warm and enjoy our standard of living. And so with that, we do take the risk of having leaks from time to time. And the industry is working hard to reduce the number of leaks and has reduced the number of leaks over time.
Are you pro Keystone yourself?
I don't think I'll take a stand on Keystone. I am pro driving and flying and staying warm. We do have a lot of crude oil up in Canada that needs to come down to the U.S. or some market in some manner, and Keystone is one of the projects that are out there that could make that happen.
Now, Tom Meisner, stay there, and you're very reassuring for the most part, but to environmentalists, is the Keystone Pipeline dangerous to the land and rivers it would cross? Susan Casey-Lefkowitz directs the international program at the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. She joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. And hello to you from New York.
Hello.
So what is the risk as you see it?
Well, the risk is several-fold. First of all, we're dealing with a different kind of pipeline than we're used to. Tar sands is not conventional oil. It's a thick, gooey substance that has to be pumped through a pipeline at high pressure. It's more corrosive. It leads to leaks more easily. And once it leaks, it's harder to clean up. But even more than that, when you strip mine and drill tar sands out of the earth from under the boreal forest in Alberta, it's very energy intensive, has a lot higher greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. It uses up a lot of water. It's very polluting. There's a lot of downstream health impacts from the extraction and from burning it in refineries. So there's essentially a lot of downsides to tar sands. And for this Keystone XL pipeline, what we're looking at is downsides without many upsides, since the main purpose of this pipeline is for the oil industry to be able to have a big international port for export overseas of tar sands, not for it actually to stay here in the U.S.
So Tom Meisner, what were you thinking as you heard that? Both her characterization of the environmental risk and whether this is really meant as a port operation to ship oil overseas rather than to even stay here in the United States.
That's the first time I've heard about the export claim, if you will. I do know that the crude oil that's produced up in that area could potentially go down to Vancouver for export to China and Asia Pacific. But as I understand it, most of this crude oil that's coming down, or all as far as I know, is coming down to be refined in the U.S. And so I don't think it's, while it is being built by pipeline companies in support of oil production, if there wasn't a need or a desire to have oil from all of us, we wouldn't need to build pipelines. So we have to sort of learn how to coexist with all the infrastructure that's necessary to support our way of living.
Tom, thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. Now let's add Andrew Nikiforuk to the conversation. He's in Alberta, where these oil sands are found in Canada. He's a muckraking journalist where there is literally muck to be raked. He wrote the book, Tar Sands, Dirty Oil, and the Future of a Continent. Hello from New York. Welcome to our program.
Good afternoon, Brian.
For people who don't know, what's a tar sand?
Tar sand is an extreme hydrocarbon. It's very heavy oil trapped in sand and clay, and you have to mine it out of the ground. It has the consistency of a hockey puck, and then you have to separate the bitumen from the sand and the clay. That's a very energy-intensive and water-intensive process, and then you have to upgrade it. Bitumen is full of carbon and doesn't have enough hydrogen, and so you have to take some of that carbon out and you have to put some hydrogen in. That takes a lot of energy and also a lot of natural gas to do that, and then you end up with something called synthetic crude. So bitumen is really bottom of the barrel oil. It's a signature peak oil, in the sense that it's telling us that, look, the era of cheap oil is over, and now we're hitting something very extreme, very difficult, that takes lots of money, lots of water, lots of energy, and a very large environmental footprint to mine.
So you see a lot of environmental damage to the land in those areas. But is this controversial in Canada? Because what we usually hear here is, well, folks, either they're going to sell this oil to the United States, or if our politics rejects it, they're just going to go ahead and sell this oil to China, and we don't want that, do we? Is that simply the case, or is this a matter of controversial debate as to whether to even use these tar sands among Canadians?
Well, there is a growing conversation and debate in Canada about this resource because of its extreme impacts and because of its cost. So people in British Columbia, which is right next door to Alberta, are raising as many concerns about the Northern Gateway pipeline to the coast to provide bitumen to China, as Americans were raising questions about the Keystone Pipeline across the Ogallala and onto Texas refineries. So I mean, we are now beginning to have a debate, but it really took Americans to get us there to question the sanity and pace of development in this country. Right now, we're kind of like Saudi Arabia. We want to export as much as we can. The money is good. Governments like the money because they don't have to run on taxes. They can run on oil revenue instead. And so the Canadian government has become very much a proponent of rapid development.
So Susan Casey-Lefkowitz at NRDC, I want to get back to this idea that the oil would be largely or to some significant degree exported from the ports in the Gulf rather than used in the United States. Our previous guest who has worked in the oil industry was unaware of that claim. How much do you think that would actually happen if we have a ready and willing market for it here in the United States? Why would it be in Canada's interest or the Canadian company's interests to export it all the way to China if they can sell it right here in the United States and we're hungry for it?
Well, it's an excellent question, and what we see is that the oil industry can get more money for their tar sands by selling it on the international market. Right now, the United States and Canada are the two main markets for tar sands. And in fact, we have enough pipeline capacity not only for all of the existing production of tar sands, but for, well into the future, for the next few decades of production of tar sands. So we don't actually need a new tar sands pipeline. The main reason for this particular Keystone XL tar sands pipeline is to actually take oil that's currently going to the Midwest, where there's a glut, and instead move it to the Gulf Coast, where it can be exported overseas and where they can get a higher price from it. And this is not something that I've made up. This is something that TransCanada, the Canadian company building the pipeline, has testified to itself in Canada in front of the National Energy Board. And so this is, information that the pipeline company and the oil industry has acknowledged, that essentially this tar sands oil from the Keystone XL pipeline is about having them be able to have a higher price for their oil by getting into an international market, which, right now it doesn't really exist for tar sands. Most of it is coming to us and being used within Canada.
So back to Canada, same question. I know your main concern is the impact on the land up there, but is this a narrative that you're familiar with too? Is this your understanding of the truth, that the oil would be used largely for shipping overseas from Texas and not as much as we may think in the United States?
Absolutely. I mean, right now you've got a lot of oil coming on stream from North Dakota, which is lessening demand for bitumen. And you will also, as a consequence of the stagnation of the American economy, you aren't burning as much oil. So, I mean, oil demand in the United States has gone down by as much as 1 million barrels a day, and is forecast to continue that descent for many years to come for a variety of different reasons. So flooding the U.S. market with bitumen has now created a bottleneck in the U.S. Midwest, and 70% of the U.S. Midwest market now runs on this product. And in order to this bottleneck has created a price differential, which means that Canadians aren't getting a good price for bitumen. So they want to bypass that bottleneck, get it to refineries on the U.S. Gulf Coast, and then put it onto super tankers. And that was what Keystone has always been about. It's about the money. It's not about energy security at all.
Well, this debate goes on in the context of the presidential campaign. We thank you in Canada. We thank you in Washington. We thank you in New York. And up next, censoring Twitter. Is it really happening, or is this just the Twitter jitters?
Today is Saturday. 60 minutes of physical activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov.
Did you know that getting up and getting active for just 60 minutes a day is all it takes to help you get stronger, look better, and feel great?
Or that fresh fruits and veggies aren't just healthier and crunchier, they can taste better too?
Eating better and getting more active is easier than you think.
Yeah! Keep watching for some fun and easy ways to discover the magic of healthy living in your life.
America.
Let's get healthy together!
Teaching a kid football is one thing. Keeping a kid in school, that's the name of my game. My name is LaDainian Tomlinson. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
LaDainian Tomlinson, we got to get some giants on that spot. Now, Twitter and censorship. Last week, Twitter announced to a chorus of 140-character groans that it would be allowing foreign countries to censor content on its network. Has the global force for good gone evil? Joining us are Reuters social media editor Anthony DeRosa, and via Skype from Pittsburgh, we are joined by Boing Boing managing editor Rob Beschizza, and from Washington, D.C., Yale Law School fellow Wendy Seltzer. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. We'll start right here in our studio. Is Twitter really censoring content?
They are, but they're doing it in a way that they feel is most transparent, which is the policy is now that if there's a tweet that they've been asked to take down in a certain country through either some legal means, the government feels like something that's out there is breaking some rules in that particular country, Twitter will block that particular tweet just in that country, and there will be a very explicit block that the people in the country will see. Now, anyone outside of that country will see the actual tweet, the entire contents. So it's kind of clever on Twitter's part, because if you're technically savvy enough, you can get around some of the blocks in those countries and still see that tweet. And people who are outside the country always have other ways that they can get that information out to the people within that country.
So you're telling me that people within countries where certain posts are being censored are going to see, in effect, a blank space that tells them that their government has censored a post?
It'll actually say this tweet has been censored, it's been blocked.
And
they're
governments
going to be reactive.
Censoring governments are okay with that?
The governments themselves in those countries? Well, I don't think I don't know if they are okay with that. This is Twitter's first response to that type of, I think that Twitter feels like they're trying to appease these governments, and this is their first attempt at trying to appease them. I don't know if it's going to be enough for those governments to feel comfortable with Twitter getting involved in those countries just yet.
Rob at Boing Boing, do you think that this is going to somehow fundamentally change Twitter? Probably for the worse, if so?
I don't think so. I don't think it will fundamentally change Twitter, but it will change how people use it. The main issue here is, as far as the people who are disappointed with Twitter are concerned, is that Twitter spent a lot of energy marketing itself and boasting about its achievements, helping protesters and activists abroad. And obviously that specific purpose to which people put Twitter to will no longer be as easily available to activists. So in that respect, Twitter won't be useful in that sense anymore.
So why do you think Twitter made this change from never censoring to allowing countries to censor?
The given wisdom is that they are interested in expanding abroad, getting access to foreign advertising markets and so on. And as far as the kind of the practical business of making money is concerned, that means opening offices in other countries. And when you open an office in another country, those employees and the kind of the business operations in that country are obviously subject to foreign laws. So what Twitter's trying to do is find a way to compromise between its kind of ethics that it's established as an American company under the umbrella of the First Amendment and its needs to expand abroad in countries which have unfree laws.
Now, you are the social media editor for Reuters, which is a very international news organization, wire service. Do you tweet on behalf of Reuters?
I do. I have my own personal Twitter account that I tweet on, and I also manage all the Reuters accounts as well, not just Twitter, but on Facebook, on Tumblr, and all the other social media.
And what's the nature of the tweets that Reuters, as a news organization, tends to put out?
We're basically informing people on broad international news, so things that are going on in business and finance and politics and technology, informing people things that are going on around the world.
Tiny 140-character versions of stories with links to your longer articles?
Right, and we also do a lot of live blogging on our actual Reuters.com website, so since we can't fit much on a 140-character tweet, we'll link people to a live blog and we'll get more granular, and we'll actually show things like camera phone videos of people on the ground in places like Syria and in Egypt, so we can get stuff that's happening in the moment from the people on the ground, and also having the journalists at Reuters combined with all the citizen journalism that's going on.
That's important in a case like Syria, where with what's going on these days, journalists aren't really allowed in, Western journalists.
Right.
So even the front page of the New York Times, where they have a Syria story, it tends to be Dateline Beirut, Lebanon, which is as close as their reporters can actually get. So you're getting uploaded video, and then you're able to tweet it out, and it becomes part of a Reuters story, even though you can't verify it in a truly journalistic sense.
Well, we do our best to verify what we can, and we generally only put out what we can verify. If we can't verify it, there's going to be a lot of caveats around what we say for a video, but we're very careful about the content that we put out there from citizen journalists.
Is Syria a country that censors tweets?
We already know that there's quite a bit of censorship in certain countries. We know that there's censorship in China. We know that there's censorship in Iran. We know that there's censorship in Syria. Twitter's already acknowledged this. And they do it through different means. They'll do it through the ISPs there. They'll do it further upstream where it doesn't even get to Twitter, for Twitter to block those bits of information.
Do you think that the new Twitter policy will restrict Reuters' ability to get the news out to countries around the world compared to what the situation has been?
It's going to make it more difficult for just everyday people to put messages out, but there's people on the ground who are very technically savvy who can get around a lot of these restrictions that the governments try to set up. There's always a way around with the internet. The internet is not one server. There's several servers all over the world, and if you can get to another server outside of the blocks, you're still going to be able to get the information out.
Or you're going to be able to get to more readers and viewers because countries that didn't allow Twitter in at all are now going to allow it on this limited basis.
Right. I think there's a spotlight on what's being censored, so it makes it a bigger deal and actually puts more attention on the things that are being censored.
Rob, how about that from your perspective? Is it possible that more information is actually getting out to more people with this new policy, again, because Twitter will exist even to a limited, somewhat censored degree, than it did before in some countries.
Well, that raises the question of whether it's more valuable for activists in a given country to know what one another is saying, or whether it's more important for people here in the West to know what's going on in those countries so that we can help out. And I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if everyone outside of a political hotspot knows what's going on, then it's okay, that it's not really censorship if the message hasn't been obliterated worldwide. But the problem then is that there's a kind of a certain parochial view going on there, where the visibility of a crime abroad is seen to be more important than the people who are suffering from it and their ability to organize politically to stop it themselves.
Given the news this week from Syria, is it possible to say how this is or would play out there?
Well, I think in a place like Syria, Twitter's going to end up being blocked one way or another by the government, by internet service providers on government orders, or by Western companies like Twitter, Facebook, if they were planning to do business in those kind of countries, though I very much doubt that they are. So, I mean, that it's like Anthony said, that when it comes to activism, people will find a way, and they will just stop relying upon platforms, single points of failure, which are operated by Western companies.
Is there an alternative for Twitter to this path, in your opinion, and still provide more service to more countries?
Well, I think people who are activists, people who want to be able to use the internet without having to worry about government censorship or the reliability of Western companies' platforms, they use technologies such as Tor, which is a kind of an anonymization system that lets people hide behind one another's IP addresses and use any kind of platform they want. And that's much more reliable if you're an activist or a protester or a dissident or what have you, than trying to get your message out on a platform like Facebook or Twitter.
Anthony, he talks about the difference between the big Western social media companies like Twitter and Facebook and things that spring up in different countries or even regions of countries very close to the ground. As social media editor for Reuters, are you always hunting these things out and looking to find the clues of what other social networks you can tap into to report the news from, what we consider faraway corners?
Yeah, I think he makes a good point as to that we can't rely on just one social network or platform for these people on the ground to get their messages out. And the fact that, again, I agree with you saying that we shouldn't be so wrapped up around knowing as a Westerner what's going on and not be as concerned about the people in those countries. And they have their own internal networks that they're using to communicate with each other. I think SMS mobile networks are probably a lot more predominant than something like Twitter in some of these countries. So mobile networks are going to be a way for them to communicate. The question is, can we get and tap into that information from the outside world? So it's difficult for me to get to that information, but you have to go back to sort of old school journalistic methods to do that. You have to try and get sources on the ground to talk to you. And you can't so much go through the normal social media channels to get that information. So once they're starting to get blocked in different ways, you have to kind of go back before the internet existed and start using your old school journalistic methods to do it.
Did Google, in a sense, pave the way for the conversation we're having today with its agreement with China not to display certain kinds of search results there?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Google did with China. But I think what Twitter's trying to do in this case is use the transparency of a site called Chilling Effects, which they're promising to put up any report where they're going to censor and put all the documentation around those different incidents. And we have to kind of rely on Twitter and Google to be telling us everything and every instance where they're asking to censor certain items. Today, actually, there was a site in Brazil that tweets about traffic areas where they're trying to stop people, and they're giving people heads up where the police are outposted. Brazil's suing Twitter, and they're going to charge them $300,000 a day for every day that site exists. So we're having the first incident where Twitter is going to be challenged, as to whether or not they're going to continue to leave that site up on their service.
Rob, are you familiar with that issue, and do you think Twitter has the guts to fight it out?
Well, that's a perfect illustration of one of the problems that Twitter's going to face. It's developed as a very considerate system of responding to censorship, like making sure that the victim of censorship knows they've been censored and posting to chilling effects exactly what's been censored. But when companies like Twitter open offices in foreign countries, they can't just pick and choose which laws they'll be subject to. There'll be countries like in Brazil, which wants more than censorship. It wants $300,000 a day whilst these Twitter accounts are live, and they'll probably demand other things. Another good example with the chilling effects problem is in the United Kingdom, a court can order a super injunction against Twitter even disclosing that it's been censored. So Twitter will have the option there of either disclosing that it's been censored or facing the possibility of contempt of court in the United Kingdom. So there's all sorts of things that Twitter's going to have to worry about once it starts doing business abroad.
The eternal standoff between information that wants and needs to be free and those who would try to restrict it for the social media age now. Thank you both very much for having this conversation. Thanks. And that's it for this week's show. We roll out a new episode Wednesday nights at 7:30, or see us anytime at CUNY.TV. And check out my daily radio show weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC. Tomorrow morning, Parenting Styles from Around the World. That's on 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC. Talk to you then.